Welcome to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and you're listening to a weekly podcast about books and life. Not necessarily in that order. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show on iTunes, or use our RSS feed with your favorite podcatcher. You can find the RSS feed on our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/vm. We're also on Twitter at vmspod, on Facebook at facebook.com/Virtual Memories Show, and on Tumblr at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com. You can support this podcast and get access to exclusive content with a recurring monthly donation via Patreon. Just visit patreon.com/VMSpod and set up your level of support. Every week you'll get new material from our patron-only blog, and you'll also get to listen to my monthly bonus podcast, Fear of a Square Planet, which features extra material from our guests and is only available to supporters of the show. So visit patreon.com/VMSpod and patronize me. Now, this is a slightly weird episode of the podcast. It's a companion to the one I did last summer with Dan Perkins, also known as Tom Tomorrow, when he'd launched a Kickstarter to help produce 25 Years of Tomorrow, a massive slipcased edition collecting his comic strip, This Modern World, as well as other work that he did during the time. Here's the backstory. When he launched the Kickstarter on a Sunday last July, I immediately pitched him on doing a podcast so we could help promote it the following week. And he had a goal of $87,000 and only 30 days to raise it. So I planned on visiting his place in Connecticut the next Thursday and posting it the following Tuesday. So 8 or 9 days into the Kickstarter, give him any push I could. Dan was on board with the idea, thought it sounded good, and then something funny happened. Dan passed $87,000 within about 20 hours of launching the Kickstarter. So that Monday, seeing where things were going, I told him I'd understand if he wanted to cancel. Figuring he'd already hit the goal, he didn't really need my help, but he wanted to go ahead and do the podcast anyway. So I really appreciated that. And by the time I posted it, which was, again, 8 or 9 days after launch, Dan was up to about $173,000 in Kickstarter donations or pledges, however you want to call them. The final tally on August 5th was 3,098 backers pledging $310,000, actually $310,537. So, in the words of our previous president, mission accomplished. Now, the final stretch goal for the project was a book launch party at the Mark Twain House in Hartford, Connecticut. And Dan hit that goal near the end. And then he surprised me because he wrote to ask me if I would interview him on stage at the party. And that's what brings us to this week's special and weird episode. On March 19th, about 150 of Dan's friends and supporters joined us at the Mark Twain House to celebrate the launch of 25 Years of Tomorrow, which is a fantastic collection, and you can order it even if you weren't part of the Kickstarter. Just go to thismodernworld.com, and you'll find links to the topatico.com site that you can buy it from. The event overall was a blast. Amy and I went up to Hartford. We went kind of early so I could do setup for my tech, which turned out not to be too extensive. And then, along with Dan and his family and the people from Topatico and Make That Thing, the companies that actually produced 25 Years of Tomorrow, as well as all the ancillary stuff that went along with the whole Kickstarter, all of us took a tour of the Mark Twain house, and you really should do that if you can get up to Hartford. It's a wonderful experience. The tour guides are fantastic. The history within that house for the 17 or so years that Twain lived there. If you like Mark Twain, if you like American literature, it's a really, really neat place to visit. So get up to Mark Twain House. You can look it up at marktwainhouse.org and learn more about it. So after the tour, there was this big reception in the museum area of the place, and I got to meet a bunch of Dan's friends and pitch a future pod guest or two. You'll find out about those when they come to fruition. And then we gathered in the auditorium, and I introduced Dan. He gave a wonderful presentation of his work. He kicked off by thanking the people from Topatico and Make That Thing. And he gave them all originals of his strips. And they were just floored by being brought up on stage and getting these accolades from him. But without them, physically, this whole thing wouldn't have come together, and none of us would have had these 15-pound volumes shipped out to us in time for the event. After that, Dan performed some of his strips. It was a big slideshow presentation that he gave, and he talked about some of the zigs and zags of his career, including the near miss of getting his cartoons on SNL because one of them ran 1 second too long, he says. A really neat segment on the impact of designing an album cover for Pearl Jam and discovering how many of their fans are going to go out and get tattoos of your art done on them. He also had a great segment about the time Keith Olbermann recited one of his comics, basically in order to goof on Bill O'Reilly when he had that countdown show on MSNBC. What it really was, though, it was a big celebration on Dan's part of the good fortune and the hard work that brought us all together for that evening. Oh, also, he showed off his new tattoo. One of the other stretch goals for the Kickstarter was that Dan would get a tattoo of This Modern World's sort of mascot, Sparky the Penguin, on his arm. He did. It's really ornate, and it got a public debut on stage at the Mark Twain House. There's all sorts of pictures from the event at thismodernworld.com, so you should go check it out, including a couple of shots of me and Amy and a few nice shots of me and Dan on stage. So what I'm saying is this is a pretty joyous event, and Dan really seemed to revel in the opportunity to celebrate his work like this on stage with people who, when you get down to it, they're the ones who supported it all. And there was a guy who flew in from New Mexico for the event. I'm not sure if he was the one who came in from furthest out, but what I'm saying is it was important to everybody. And then once he finished, he and I sat down to talk, and that's where we come in. There was a time limit to the whole event, so this is my way of saying I made a tactical decision to keep our segment kind of brief. We'd already talked last July. There's a great episode around that. If you want to listen to that in-depth conversation with Dan, go into the archives of the show and download episode 125, or look up Perkins and Tom Tomorrow. You'll find it. We talk there more about his history, life, influences, etc. This time, though, I had some good questions, but I also decided to open up the floor to Q&A because I figured, these guys in the audience, they're why we're all here, and really they deserve their chance to talk to the man of the hour and ask him some stuff. I still interject with a couple of quips and jokes during that segment too. So that's what you get this time, about 15 to 18 minutes of me and Dan, and then another 18 to 20 minutes of audience Q&A. So I think this pairs really well with that previous conversation we had. I didn't want to go over lots of old territory that we talked about in July, so I think these two are going to complement each other really well. That is my big caveat for the episode. Also, the audio setup was feeding into a single XLR output because it was on wireless mic, so it's a little different than the regular audio that you get. And that's the whole backstory. So I want to thank the Mark Twain House staff for treating us all so well, especially Jacques Lamar, the Director of Communication and Special Programs at Mark Twain House. He did a fantastic job coordinating the event, making sure we were all taken care of, introducing me so I could introduce Dan. Really, just a top-notch job by that place and the people there. It's a sort of thing you should look into if you're in that area and you're looking to hold any sort of literary event. I recommend the Mark Twain House highly. I also want to thank Dan for inviting me to interview him both times. Last summer, he could have just said, well, I'd love to do your podcast, dude, but I'm really busy with my fantastically successful Kickstarter. But he didn't, and I appreciate that. And getting to share the stage with him last weekend was a real blessing. Getting to see, somebody in the culmination of their life's work. That was really something. So thank you, Dan. I appreciate both opportunities. Now, here's the intro that I read at the beginning of the evening. Dan Perkins, better known as Tom Tomorrow, is the creator of the weekly political cartoon This Modern World, which appears in approximately 80 newspapers across the U.S. and on websites such as Daily Kos and The Nation. His work has appeared in publications including The New York Times, The New Yorker, Spin, Mother Jones, Esquire, The Economist, The Nation, U.S. News and World Report, and The American Prospect, and has been featured on Countdown with Keith Olbermann. That would be the Bill O'Reilly segment I mentioned earlier. In 2013, Dan was awarded the prestigious Herblock Prize in a ceremony at the Library of Congress, and in 2015, he was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. He received the first-place Robert F. Kennedy Award for Excellence in Journalism in 1998 and 2003, and has also received the Media Alliance Meritorious Achievement Award, the James Madison Freedom of Information Award from the Society of Professional Journalists, the Professional Freedom and Responsibility Award from the Association for Education and Journalism, and the James Aronson Award for Social Justice Journalism. In 2009, he collaborated with Pearl Jam to create artwork for their album Backspacer. Dan has published 9 anthologies of his work and one mega-sized, 15-pound, 2-volume slip-cased edition of 25 Years of Tomorrow. And now, the Virtual Memories live conversation with Dan Perkins. Also, stick around because after Dan, we're debuting a new monthly feature, NJ Poets Corner.
Okay, is my recording going? Good. This is going to be a future episode of the Virtual Memories show, so like I said, keep it clean. Dan, you and I, we recorded last August, about a week into the Kickstarter, and we'll talk a bit more about the project, but I do want to remind you exactly what you said about Donald Trump at the time, which was that he's the Herman Cain of this campaign. He's a momentary thing that's going to last another week or month.
Okay, it was August. It was August, and I was busy with the Kickstarter campaign. Okay. I was like, okay, politics, whatever. I believed that. I believed that he was a passing fad. I got it wrong then, but that's why I point out that by September, I was writing cartoons. I have a cartoon with him in the Oval Office. The closing caption is, "It's all fun and games until the crazy man is in the Oval Office." And he's tweeting, "Haha, losers and haters, I'm in charge now."
Given the absolute absurdity of this presidential campaign, how do you function as a satirist in this day and age? Like, honestly, how much of a challenge is it producing satire?
With great exhaustion. It's actually really hard to figure out. The New York Times had an article on how comedians are having a hard time getting a handle on Trump, because what I keep saying is that when someone is a walking cartoon, when someone is a walking satire, satire is the art of exaggeration for humorous emphasis and to make a point. And it is really hard. Everyone is just staring at Trump. How do you exaggerate Trump? The one pretty good line that I've had coming out of his mouth that people seem to respond to was, I had him saying, if I can remember this, "The evangelicals love me, and I love that book of theirs, the Bible. It's one of my favorites." But mostly, it's actually, yes, Trump has been very difficult to get a handle of, terribly frightening, and I'm sorry, but I'm not convinced Hillary Clinton's an awfully good political candidate. I'm not sure Bernie Sanders would be any better, but I think it's entirely possible that Donald Trump is our next president, and I hope I'm as wrong on that as I was in August.
Yeah. Well, that actually leads me, was going to be my final question, but I may as well get to it now. Do you have an escape plan?
Well, I do operate under a pseudonym.
That actually brings up, I put out a call on Twitter, which got exactly one question for you for this. I don't have a big following. This guy, much bigger following. But Marina Stern wanted me to ask, and this is her exact words, so don't think I'm tooting your horn. You're a world-renowned celebrity whose name and face whose name and face are virtually unknown. What's that like? The world-renowned celebrity part is kind of an eye-opener, but
Right. I had no idea. Don't I get to go to better parties or something?
you'd think. You do have Pearl Jam, at least helping out with the Kickstarter.
Yeah, I don't even know how to answer that. Marina's a friend on Twitter, but I have no idea how to answer that. I'm kind of a guy who sits alone in a room watching too much cable news and spending too much time on Twitter, and it's all fairly isolating. It's lovely that people imagine that it's more exciting than it is.
Yeah.
But
Was there any regret about being Tom Tomorrow as opposed to Dan Perkins?
no. I mean, it's occasionally. I'll tell you what. Since I moved to Connecticut, where there's a local car dealership, Dan Perkins Chevy.
Maybe that's where she thinks your celebrity is coming.
She's probably got me confused with that. But I was always Dan Perkins, and since I moved to Connecticut 12 years ago, I have started calling myself Daniel Perkins to people I don't know, because every time at the grocery store, like, oh, Dan Perkins, haha, some joke about buying cars. I have never heard that joke before. Thank you, grocery store person. Anyway, I'm sure we bought our Subaru at Dan Perkins Subaru. So the back of my car says Dan Perkins. But the next car, that was 12 years ago, and we're due for a new car, and I am buying it from Tom Tomorrow Subaru.
We should talk about the Kickstarter, which we went into in our past conversation about everything that goes into it. But can you talk a little about how your life and how your work has changed since launching this and since getting the final edition?
Yeah, well, this has been a really long process, as I say, and I've expressed my gratitude to my team that made it possible. Like, really, this was not going to happen without Jeffrey and Sarah and Holly and Eliza. the movie convinced you all, as I say, to cough up money for vaporware. But I wanted to do this. And I didn't know if it was going to happen, and I spent a year working on pulling it together, because the thing is, once you have the Kickstarter, as some of you may have personally experienced, the clock is ticking, a certain impatience sets in. I paid my money, where's my product? And I've been you all know, I've put out so many updates. Every time we hit a snag, I tried to be totally transparent about this, because it's actually, we're not Amazon. We were a very small group of people trying to make this happen, and Jeffrey tells me tonight it was an experiment in seeing what they were capable of, which was not a thing I knew when you agreed to do it. And I'm very glad it worked out for all of us. So I didn't know if it was going to happen, and but I had to do most of the work. I had to do all of the digging through the archives and organizing and writing. I had to do all of this on faith that the book might actually happen. So I spent most of the time on this project in a state of quantum uncertainty, believing it was going to happen and simultaneously not believing it was going to happen. And I think there was a dead cat involved in there. I'm not sure. So it was amazing. It was amazing that people embraced it and that it was so successful. And then that just becomes the normal fact of your life. So it's both life-changing and now just part of my story.
So you don't have a big pile of money that you roll around in on your back like in Breaking Bad?
Talk to me after taxes are over, because, man, I don't know if I'm going to end up losing money on this whole thing right now.
What was it like looking back at 25 years of Tomorrow? What did you find when you went back to the very beginning as opposed to where you are now?
Let me just read something I wrote.
If you break it, you bought it, though.
I wrote. I can't phrase this better than I wrote in the introduction. revisiting 25 years of your own work is probably not a task for the faint of heart. At the outset, I didn't know if I'd end up wanting to bury it all and to maybe salt the earth for miles around for good measure. But I came away feeling pretty good about this thing I've spent half my life doing. The work holds up well, and I'm proud of it, and that wasn't a bad place to land. So that's what I think. But it was a terrifying prospect at the beginning. I mean, there were cartoons in there I haven't looked at in 25 years, and I wasn't sure how I was going to respond to that.
Do you feel much of it dated, or do you think? I mean, some of it is political humor, Ken Starr, et cetera, are things that those kids today.
I think the topics are dated. The 25-year-old topics are dated, and I spent a lot of time writing additional text to try to explain things that weren't self-evident. We also live in the age of Google, so you can always figure these things out. But what's actually surprising to me, and a little bit depressing, is how many of the topics, I mean, I was writing about gun control and healthcare reform 25 years ago.
Does stuff like the Clinton Lewinsky, Star You Are stuff almost come off as a more innocent time, which again seems absolutely mind-blowing given what was in the Starr report. But do you look back at that now and think, wow, we were kind of naive back then?
Yeah, I really do think that. I think I think we never quite know how terrible it's going to get. You didn't come here for optimism, I'm assuming.
I'm sorry.
Somebody, I have a client. I was working on a piece, and they said, "Well, the important thing is to be positive." They wrote back and said, "You understand that's not my strong suit."
The crowdfunding process and we're not going to say self-publishing because this is clearly a massively collaborative effort.
These are real publishers. This was a big effort,
whom we should congratulate yet again for an amazing piece of work. But what does this model teach you? Given that, like you said, the business model has been collapsing, even your future Sparky comes back and tells past Sparky there was nothing you could really do. What does this model teach you about what you can and can't do as a cartoonist now?
Yeah, it's. I mean, I think it doesn't solve the ongoing problem. I mean, to run in a bunch of newspapers that are sending you money every week is actually a sustainable career. Having a one-time big Kickstarter is not. I mean, it's a fabulous thing, but it's not a sustainable. Mm-hmm. It's not a sustainable model in terms of an ongoing career. I mean, you just have to keep scrambling. You have to keep reinventing, and it kind of annoys me, but it's also not alien to me because I haven't had an actual job since 1990. I've been hustling and convincing papers to run my work and doing all kinds of things for 25 years. This is just the latest iteration. The thing I miss is, there was just something when you ran in the alt weekly that everyone in the local community was reading. The internet gives me. I mean, I could not have done these books without the internet. It's an entirely mixed blessing because I could not have published these books and sold them to people in Edinburgh and in Denmark and in where else? Hong Kong. I mean, they've been going out all over the place. I couldn't. You could not have done that in a pre-internet age ever. There was just simply no way. At the same time, the internet is killing my local papers. My wife was just giving a talk in a community where there's still a thriving local paper, and everyone on the campus was familiar with my work. And that was my life 10 years ago. I could go anywhere my strip ran and give a talk and fill the house. And what I have now is this kind of wide but thin reach. And it's just a different thing, but it is the world we live in. So you adapt.
Is there an extent to which the Kickstarter has opened some doors for you at all? Has there been any?
There is, and I have. I would say watch my Twitter or my website because I have some stuff coming up that might be interesting. But one thing I can say one thing right now is that I have a new publishing deal. This thing, I've been in the publishing wilderness. People were just convinced there was no market for cartoon reprint books. And I've been in the publishing wilderness for a number of years, and putting out a 1,000-page book that people eagerly and enthusiastically supported caught the eye of a publisher. So I have a new publishing deal. So that is a thing that has changed.
Fantastic. And that's thanks to all you guys also. So congratulate yourselves.
Yes, that is 100%. And that was also part of the Kickstarter, was just kind of changing the narrative. I was in a place where I was struggling to get books out, and the papers were dying, and the websites weren't paying very well, and it really felt like a thing that was over. And I just wanted to take that narrative, even if it was just my own narrative, I wanted to take it and turn it completely around. And you all and everyone else who supported this thing did that. Just changed that.
Thank you. So what next? What do you look at besides this
I'm
modern
going to
world?
Disneyland.
Oh, no, Disneyland. Well, what forms are you interested in? What other, besides the regular strip, do you look at long form comics? Are you looking at prose? Are there other areas you're looking to get into?
This is where I've got some stuff going on that I just
never mind. Okay.
I can't go into yet, but there's different things coming up, I think.
I just think of peers of yours throughout the years who've all had to come up with solutions in the post-alt weekly world. So this one's awfully impressive to see. You did mention when we talked in August that you wanted to produce something that your son could have on his bookshelf.
There you go, kid.
Well, the problem is, did you have to build stronger bookshelves when you finally got this together?
Yeah, I will once I take my comp copies home tonight,
Final
Not really
question.
comp copies if I'm the one paying for them, but my copies.
Yeah.
You never gave me a copy of the book. So
Yeah. That's a stretch goal, son.
Yeah. If we had reached 350,000.
Okay. Now, my last question before we start taking questions from the audience, and Jacques will be around with a microphone. I don't see him necessarily. Oh, there he is with a microphone. My last question, whose hatred are you happiest about?
Wow,
I mean, Coulter's good, but
Coulter's good.
O'Reilly?
Mostly, I mean, the problem that's a tricky question, because this is another lovely thing about the internet is you do get to hear from everyone who hates you, and it's it's not just people like what was it she said
The ordinary
world
Americans?
famous celebrities such as myself.
oh yeah, world-renowned celebrity.
World-renowned. It's not just world-renowned celebrities such as myself, but women on Twitter, like lots of people on Twitter, everyone is getting harassed all the time. Like we live in this world now where we live in this world that was created by 21-year-old coders with no life experience, and we are trapped in their little brains now trying to figure out. Do you remember the Harlan Ellison story? I have no mouth and I must scream. we are that character trapped in the belly of the beast now, and these young coders who are inventing throwing out things like Twitter without thinking about the abuse and the harm that their tools are making possible. So we're in this transitional phase, and I hope that we grow up. I hope that we grow up and start to deal with these things, because you see people's lives just turning to hell all the time as a result of some misunderstood tweet or something. Like we're just all walking through a minefield, and yet we're social people. And the internet is like Soylent Green. The internet is people. The internet is made of people. It's just us. And sometimes we're great and sometimes we suck. And we just haven't figured out how to deal with the sucky parts very well yet. But that sort of was off topic, but that's how I feel about being hated.
Said like a true vile smear merchant.
Yeah, that was probably a bad week for Bill O'Reilly. That was that cover, the falafel loofah cover. That was in the Every Village Voice box in New York City, and I watched him all week. I expected him to come back at me, and he never did, because he just didn't want to acknowledge that it existed.
I think that personally that's a good hatred to have.
And I guess I'm kind of guilty of dishing it out in that case. But I feel like someone like Bill O'Reilly, I try to find deserving targets, and that's the thing. Like too often online, that sort of mass mob mentality. It's just almost as if it's like some dystopian game show where someone is just picked out at random for the 15-minute hate, except it's like the 15-day hate or the 15-month hate.
Well, my final question, actually, besides leave it off of that, but can you sign my copy of 25 Years of Tomorrow before we split?
No.
Oh, son of a bitch. Okay. Let's take some questions from the audience then. I think I'm pretty good. Actually, start over here because Jacques is close.
All right, real quick, I want to let you know, since it's going to be recorded, please hold the microphone up so that people can hear you, and that way it'll be recorded for virtual memories as well.
Yeah. Also, just in keeping with what I've experienced at most Q&As, no 3.5-minute monologues that don't actually have a question.
Right,
okay?
right.
Good. Okay. Shoot.
So in trying to persuade my spouse to come with me tonight, I had to remind him of who you were and what your cartoons were like. So I kind of mentioned Gary Trudeau, but not really, or maybe whoever drew Bob Dobbs, but not really, or maybe Pee Wee Herman, but not really. Who do you find inspiring, and which cartoonists or artists or other sources of inspiration do you rely on?
Yeah, I mean those are Gary Trudeau is a good example. I think at a certain point in a person's career, I think the inspiration part comes in earlier on, and I think when you are young and inspired to try to set out on some path and create something new, you are inspired by, for me it was definitely Gary Trudeau. It was Mad Magazine, early Mad Magazine, when I was reading it back in the dark ages. But it is still. It just had very good political satire in it, in the guise of being this magazine for children. I am blanking. Who else do I say? Jules Pfeiffer, absolutely. Bill Griffith, who did a thing here recently, and Charles Schultz. Thank you. If I can't think of answers, I'm just going to give the mic to my family. They've heard too many of these things. But and Charles Schultz was, when I was really a kid, when I was 7 or 8, Charles Schultz just made me fall in love with this art form, and I had the very distinct honor of meeting him, having lunch with him once, and have in subsequent years become fairly good friends with his wife Jeannie, and wrote an introduction to one of those. Fantagraphics has been publishing a series of, I think they're like 20. How many volumes, Nick? You would know. So about let's say 20 or 30 volumes, but like every Peanuts cartoon ever. And the person who has written the introduction for the final volume was Barack Obama. So I'm in a fairly elite club on that one.
Having brought up Trump a couple of times already, I'm curious if you have any comment on David Brooks's recent revelation that he doesn't actually understand America after all. Is that a surprise to you? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Because that's all I was thinking of when you had the Ordinary American strip up there was,
David Brooks has been someone that I've mentioned a time or two in the cartoon. And, he famously went out into America. He wrote about how, what was it, that there was or was not a salad bar at Applebee's, or, boy, David Brooks, you've just made my brain go. I did a thing about him. He wrote a column about marijuana legalization, about how he was opposed to it because it made him uncomfortable. And I read that, and I just thought it was obscene, because there are people whose lives are ruined by something, who are in jail or have criminal records. This whole war on marijuana, is something that dates back to the early part of the century, roots in racism. Marijuana was was basically made illegal as a way of oppressing the black population at the time. It's a law that's rooted in racism about something that's no more harmful than a glass of wine. So many lives are ruined, kids in jail, mainly African American kids in jail. And here's white privilege David Brooks saying, well, I don't know, it makes me kind of uncomfortable, so I think we should keep destroying all these lives. So I did a cartoon about that. That's the last time, I think. But he's a recurrent character in the strip, and he is not someone in the strip who is portrayed as understanding America very well. So, yeah, I mean, you know, that's why I showed the Plutocrat Pete cartoon, is that Donald Trump and this ugly this ugly underbelly of America that's coming up, and boy, I don't know how much time you spend on Twitter. I was looking at pro-Trump Twitter today, and they have really creative punctuation and capitalization. And I saw someone saying, well, of course Donald Trump isn't going to, I mean, imagine the random capitalization, but of course he's not going to explain what he would do as president, because then other people will steal his ideas. You know, but this and the sort of Trump's popularity with the white power movement and this sort of thing, like, this is all, I mean, this is all stuff that David Brooks wants to imagine a more genteel Republican base, but this is all stuff that the plutocrat Petes of the Republican Party have been sort of deliberately, you know, they made a deal with the devil a long time ago that they thought they could use these voters that they clearly did not respect or agree with, and it's come back to bite them. I am perfectly delighted to watch David Brooks try to wrestle with that. I'm looking forward to his "This is why we must vote for Hillary Clinton" column, which will come.
Yeah, do you think Never Trump will actually hold up, or do you think establishment Republicans will, provided he wins a nomination, hold their noses and find some way to support Trump this summer?
Well, I think it's going. I mean, I hate doing prognostication.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Never mind. Don't jinx us.
But it's okay, Gil. Because, you know, who the hell knows at this point? This has been crazy. I think, honestly, I'm gonna cut that. I'm gonna thread that needle right down the middle. I'm gonna say that some people, like Rudy Giuliani, has now signed on. I'm gonna say that some people are gonna make their peace with Trump, and some people are going to just walk away from it. And hopefully that division, hopefully that split, keeps us from President Trump.
Solid. Next question. Someone's got the mic in there.
Yeah, you were talking about how the internet has changed, you know, kind of changed your career and thing. And so I was just kind of wondering if you had anything you wanted to say about your experiences starting up and running Sparky's List.
How many do we have? Any subscribers here? Awesome! Look at that. It's been, so I have this subscription email list. I started up before this website Patreon started up, which is a sort of Kickstarter for ongoing sustainability. And I stuck with Sparky's List because it was just too confusing to readers to have these two different options. But it's actually not all that easy to run your own subscription email list. Like, I was doing it through Amazon for a while, but for various technical reasons, the integration between the various systems I used, like there aren't a lot of people doing paid email lists, so it's actually been kind of complicated. I have a system right now that's working pretty well. I found a guy who wrote some software that it makes everything work, but it's weirdly complicated. You would think it would be an easy thing, but most people are not charging for their subscription lists, although it's an obvious, like, we're being told all the time, it's the age of crowdfunding, it's the age of reader support, and this is a really obvious way to do crowdfunding and reader support. But it's been kind of more complicated than you would think, just to keep the mechanics of it going. But the thing itself is great. I mean, I like having this kind of semi-private place where I just feel like I'm talking to friends. and so I tend to write little essays every week that are kind of lovely to put out, knowing that I'm not going to have a jillion people arguing about them on Twitter. This man. Okay.
I grew up.
This is one of the men who. This is one of the people who flew in from far away, and I want to thank you for that.
I came in from Albuquerque. I was just curious. I grew up on Walt Kelly, and as my political awareness grew and my fondness for him grew, in a sense, it was kind of dated and captured in a particular time. But I was really excited to connect with you and sort of have a renewal of that whole experience. Sort of news through cartoons and so forth. So what is your experience of sharing that in terms of, did you have some influence from Walt Kelly, say, in his drawing and stuff? Or is that...
Not Walt Kelly. I mean, some of the other people I mentioned, like just that sense of, this kind of magical, wonderful thing, this that were comics, that are comics. There was, as I say, it's as I was saying about Schultz when I was very young, but there were certain artists who just made me, it just filled me with delight. I just loved it. I don't know, that feeling is sort of harder to find as you become an older, wizened professional. But I hope there are people who relate to this work in that way.
Me. Hi. So we've been talking about the internet. Social implications of computers is what I do for a living. One of the things that everybody says about
Got
the
a
internet...
millennial here.
Yeah. No.
Kids. You guys and your
wrong millennial.
You guys and your rideshare apps and your
right. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, please.
One of the things that people say about the internet is that people only get to see things they already agree with because of your ability to sort of tailor what you read instead of, you get the New York Times and it has everything and you read everybody in the old days. And I'm wondering if you have any sense that you're preaching to the choir more than you used to be.
Well, as I say, it used to be really lovely to just know that you were running in that paper. Kind of broke my heart when the San Francisco Bay Guardian went out of business because I lived there a long time and I really liked the sense that I still had a foothold there. And you're running in the Bay Guardian and everyone of a certain sort of mindset, let's say, is going to pick up that paper and even if it's just people picking up the paper to look for the listings and then they read the cartoon and they're exposed to it. And I think there's some truth to you're mainly more. I think that the difference is now that it becomes a destination. Like to find the cartoon now, you have to be looking for the cartoon rather than just running across it. Though I will say, I hear from plenty of people who do not agree with me. So I'm not sure what that does to that whole self-selecting bubble theory because there are I have plenty of contrary evidence.
So, speaking of the confluence of 25 years and penguins and Donald Trump,
very natural confluence.
Yes,
of
and
events
and strange timing. Does it give you any hope for the medium as a whole that right around the time that your Kickstarter funded, Bloom County came back?
That was awesome. That's someone actually that I should have mentioned earlier, and I'm so happy to see him cartooning again. I was living in Iowa City in 1981, and he was there because his girlfriend at the time was in med school or something, and so he used to, he must have been all of 24, 25. He was one of these guys who hit it big young. But he would come into the copy shop. I was working in a copy shop, and he would come in and make copies, and there I was holding his original art and making copies of them. And it was amazing. I never managed to convince him to give me. I never asked. I was totally starstruck. But I do have a poster that is a promotional bookstore poster that he signed for me and drew a little Opus the Penguin on. I have that hanging in my house. I've had that for many years. So I'm a longtime fan of Burke Breathitt, and I'm delighted to see him doing work again.
You mentioned that Charles Schulz was an influence. I just seem to remember that he ran a daily cartoon.
Sorry, what?
Charles Schulz.
Right.
An influence. I'm remembering that he ran a daily cartoon.
That is true.
And you are not.
Well, I he was also not a political. I mean, as I say, it's about just the form, the art form itself, and being sort of delighted by it. But I came up in the weekly press, and so I adapted to the weekly rhythms, which, the work I do is actually fairly, well, it's different from Schulz, but it's just sort of complicated because it takes a couple days of research every week. I need to know what I'm talking about, and then it takes time to write. So it's a longer process. I could not do this work on a daily basis. It would have to be something very different and much quicker than I think I'm capable of doing. I did want to say, by the way, I wanted to say this earlier and I forgot, but my wife, who has been with me, this is 25 years, and we've been married 17, and we've been together, I guess, about 20 years, and she's helped write a lot of these cartoons. She's at least helped me toss the ideas around. Her presence is very much in these in 20 years worth of these 25 years of cartoons, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. So last question, make it a good one, and then I'm going to sign. And if you didn't buy anything to sign, I brought some index cards, and I have like these ink stamps, and I'll give you a little thing that you can take home with you. So everybody gets something. So.
All right. Well, first of all, I just wanted to say thank you, not just for tonight, but for 25 years of giving us, in most cases, for free, a weekly dose of in what in many years was an alternate reality that helped us survive the Bush years and get through various
Those were hard years, I got to say. They were hard years on my end. They were hard years when you're on my end getting, like death threats and hate mail and all of that stuff. Like that was just 2000, right after 2001, right after 9/11, when I was living in New York City for like 5 years. That was just a really, really hard time to be a cartoonist doing the kind of work I do.
I'm so glad you did and that you stayed with it. And I'm also thrilled that this successful campaign has worked so well for you, and you've obviously got a great team, and I don't want to minimize their contribution. But let's not kid ourselves. You've done the heavy lifting, and we have now have the
Actually,
heavy
I
books
think
to
for the
show
past
for it.
2 months, they've been doing the heavy lifting.
That's true. And there was some talk of workman's comp, but I'll let them sort that out. But thank you for 25 years of just spot-on humor and relief and help. And for me, you see it as dark. I see it as hopeful. But I do actually have a question. You handed out a few originals as a thank you, which is lovely. Are you still using pen and ink, or do you work on the computer?
I've been digital for a long time. So those are even rarer because they are a finite supply. But I wanted some way of saying thank you because, as I say, this was a dream project. It was a dream come true, and really, really, really would not have ever happened without these people. So let's close it out and give them a round of applause. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
And that was Dan Perkins. Go to thismodernworld.com so you can follow his blog and check out his latest comics and sign up for his weekly Sparky's List email. You can also go from there to topatoco.com, TOPATOCO, to buy a copy of 25 Years of Tomorrow, that 1,000-page, 15-pound, 2-volume slipcased edition of Dan's work. It really is a mind-blowing edition, both in terms of content and, the whole package. This will sound weird. I'm proud to have helped fund it. And if I had even the tiniest effect on convincing someone else to join that Kickstarter and help out, then I'm ecstatic. And of course, again, I'm honored that Dan asked me to share the stage with him at the launch party. Now, you heard Dan praise the Topatoco people and their affiliated company, Make That Thing, during the show. They've done a wonderful job on this whole project, not only producing the book, but also the other materials like the T-shirts, stickers, book plates, fold-out car for Sparky the Penguin. And on top of that, actually shipping it to the 3,098 or so Kickstarter supporters. So if you're looking for professional management, manufacturing, and fulfillment for creative crowdfunded projects, visit makethatthing.com. MAKETHATTHING. Now, our next segment is a new monthly feature for the Virtual Memories show. Charles Bivona, also known as #NJPoet, is going to join the show every month for a 15-minute segment about poetry, teaching, the intersection of virtual and physical worlds, social media, and other topics that we're going to light on. He's a past guest of the show, and I've known him since around 1998 or so. This one, I'll warn you, is a little diffuse, but we're still kind of setting up who Chuck is and what we're up to and kind of establishing the parameters for where this conversation is going to go. Subsequent episodes are going to really focus on specific topics or poems. So now you get the first installment of NJ Poet's Corner with Charles Bivona. So it's been almost 2 years since you've been on Legit. We had you on Fear of a Square Planet last month, but we're going to start New Jersey Poet Corner.
All right.
Or Charles Bivona, or Chuck Bivona, however we want to call it.
You can call me Chuck. You're a Chuck person.
Okay, Chuck Bivona.
We can talk about what that means, too.
What's changed?
What's
It's been
changed?
almost 2 years. What's changed?
All right, well, I mean, I'll be quite frank about it. Back in November, the depression that I had been kind of trying to cognitively deal with myself caught up with me, and I collapsed. If I remember correctly, I was kind of in the state of almost like a 9-year-old boy. I was just crying, and my brain just was not functioning properly. So, Luce and my mother and other people in my family who have been a support group, because you've known me for a long time. This has been with me since I was 19. And something was different about this time in that I had almost this AA moment of acceptance and surrender, where I said, enough of this, trying to stand through this with a tough upper lip, and be grace under pressure and all that ridiculous macho nonsense, which I thought, I didn't really have a lot of, but, I had to come face to face with this fact that I was trying to kind of man up through clinical depression. And, I gave into that, and I started seeing a new therapist who flatly refused to take a Freudian route, which was great, because, when I walk into a therapy situation and I tell them about my childhood, it's like crack.
Connect the dots.
They can't resist it. It's just, oh my God, that's got to be it. But I spent 25 years in therapy talking about my childhood, and I got back in touch with my dad, and we talked about, the Vietnam War and the abuse. And he told me at one point that he felt very bad about the things that had happened, but he was out of his mind, and I accepted that, and we moved on to forgiveness. So this woman was more about, what's cognitively going on with you that is causing this depression. And by the 5th session, she was saying things like, go to your doctor. Do you know what I mean? Because she would say, well, I want to try this cognitive program with you that was invented by ... and it'll make you think differently about ... And then the next session I would come in and I would have done a research project and I would know more about that, you know, because I'm crazy, like obsessive study guy. And she used to laugh. So, you know, she's actually very wise when you think about it, because she could have kept bilching me for money forever.
Yeah.
But we're at the point now where she's saying things like, you know, maybe I'm just going to be your on-call therapist. If you need to come in and, you know, just kind of work out something that you're struggling with. But the odd thing about it is when I started this kind of recovery, I guess, count up, you would call it, like, you know, depression recovery day one, and then on Twitter. And I would tweet something, or either a video or an image or a quote or just something like depression day two, much easier to get out of bed, you know. Good. So, or things like that. And as the depression started to lift, I started to have these very odd experiences, in the sense that about a month into the recovery, I thought to myself, wow, I mean, I think I'm coming out of this depression that I've been in since I was 19. In other words, even when I thought I was out of it since 19, and I'm 40, going to be 44 in July. You know, even when I thought I was out of it, I wasn't. And now that it's really lifting, I have to kind of deal with the fact that I've been depressed for over 20 years.
Your adult life.
My adult life. And then a few more weeks went by, and I started to say to myself, you know, the last time I remember feeling this good was when I was like 6. You know, so maybe I've been depressed since I'm 6, you know, which again, you got to step back and deal with. That's an existential situation, you know, like I've been yanked around like a puppet by this disease my whole life, mostly. And then a few more weeks went by and I said, no, I've never felt like this before. You know, so now I'm grappling with the idea that I was born depressed. And really it took this long for the medical field, and that's not a shot against the medical field, it's a shot against how complicated the disease is. It took this long to really kind of get it under control to the point where it's going away, you know. And I'm in this unusual position of being a guy who is very well trained in poetry and literature, who almost became a Buddhist monk, who then, after my master's degree, because of you actually, after my master's degree, I decided not to just go and get a PhD in literature. I decided to study history and philosophy. You know, intellectual history. Yeah. Well, you said it was.
I'm a damaging influence on
you're
people.
Not a damaging influence. You said I remember we weren't really good friends back then, and I said we were at one of those. What did you used to call them?
The smart guy salon.
Smart guy salons with the chip.
Yeah.
And
this was a gathering at the WWE restaurant in Times Square back around the turn of the century with Chuck, our friend Sang, Samuel Delaney, Vince Chaz, and various other smart people I could get into a room.
We went to the WW. It was the WWF back then.
Oh yeah, before they lost that lawsuit. So yeah, Smart Guy Salon. That was the precursor to this podcast. So.
But I remember I was coming out of my master's program, and I said to you, I was thinking about either going for a PhD in, you know, comparative lit or intellectual history, in which case I would have to learn a lot about philosophy and history and politics, and then combine all that with what I already knew about literature. And you said something like, for goodness sakes, man, differentiate yourself, or something like that. You know, or something very
sounds like me.
Yeah, and I that kind of like reverberated with me, and I carried that with me for a while. So now I'm in this very interesting place where I'm realizing that I've been depressed for most of my life, if not all of my life. And now I'm coming out of the depression, and I have this mind of a philosopher, historian, Zen monk, poet. And I'm very well equipped to talk about, you know, what was just going on, what just happened to me. And the other thing that's strange about it is once the depression was lifted, I started looking around my house, and there were all these manuscripts laying around, that I had never seen before. So I think within the last 3 months, I started doing public readings, which led to publishers calling, which has led to, I have a chapbook, which I never thought I would produce. I was a little bit of a snob when I was young, that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to do it my way, But the guy that the publishing company that I'm working with, he makes really nice small collections of poems, and he approaches it kind of like a record album. He's like, there should be a 12 theme.
Yeah,
12. He wants to do 12 poems. So I went home and I started looking at all these poems that I had written, which has nothing to do with the blogging, right? I had this whole career as a poet. I started publishing poetry in 1994, So I started looking at the poems that I would want to put out there, and I realized that I have a collection of poems that spans from 1999 to 2015. 12 poems. And when you lay them out in chronological order, it's kind of this really interesting poetic journey from the guy that you knew at 24 to NJ Poet.
Yeah.
And that the publisher insists that the title of the book has to be #NJ Poet. So it's called #NJ Poet, the early years, and I'm trying really hard to make it work out so that a piece of art by Sang Lee can be on the cover. Because then it'll be this 12-poem book that no matter what else I do going forward, I'll just love that book the most. That'll be my rosebud.
Sang being the person who connected us and who died.
Right, and it's worth saying. Heart attack, at 43, which I am now, which has been fun too from a psychological.
But you don't smoke.
I did
as much as Sang did, which was
well. I felt about that too, man. I thought all the time I spent with him in his apartment while he was smoking 3 packs a day, I was sucking up all that secondhand smoke. Yeah. But who knows?
But we were talking about Fran Lebowitz before this, and she's convinced the secondhand smoke thing is bullshit. So that no study's going to live up to. Yeah, she's also got her reasons. But
who knows?
Have you been writing poetry since post-depression? And how is it different than...
The funny thing about post-depression is...
which isn't post, it's a process, but yeah.
Right. I mean, like, the way I described it to my one friend, I that's the other thing I've been... Since the depression is lifted, I've been realizing how trapped I've been in my house, So I've been visiting with old friends, and I told one old friend that... back in November, I mean, metaphorically speaking, it was like I had filthy water up to my chin, and I was just trying. No, it's okay. I'm okay.
Yeah. Don't want to be a problem. Yeah.
I said, and now it's kind of like the water's up to my shins, and it's still filthy water, but I can dance in water up to my shins. I can move, and every day the water gets a little bit lower. But I can't allow myself to think that it's over because, there are things that there are protocols I need to follow, which is, I did an interview with Everyday Health 2 days ago where they just wanted me to walk them through a day in my life as someone living with depression. Yeah. And it was interesting when I actually talked about it, how many things I do just to keep myself straight, like I have rules, like you can't go to bed with dishes in the sink. That's something a depressed person would do, Yeah. You should floss your teeth 4 times a day, four times a week, or every other day, or 3 times a week, or something. So there's a lot of little wash your face stuff. Yeah. And
so my fear is that we're going to do this over the course of a couple of months, during which time you're like going to convert to Islam or something, because that's the most ritual.
The only reason I didn't become a monk at 26 was because my teacher said that the celibate life wasn't for me.
That's true.
And I said, well, what makes you say that? And she said, you flirt with me all the time, and I'm a nun.
You're walking around with this giant erection.
Yeah. No, it's not a giant erection, Gilbert. Calm down. So, I mean, I think, rather than prattle on about that, cool things are happening for me. But I think part of the reason why I want to do these conversations is because I've been, kind of dealing with this. What would you even call what's happening to me on Twitter? Storm, eruption.
I don't even know what the terminology would be.
I don't think there. I mean, it's humbling, But at the same time, I'm watching you run around and interview people who make me feel starstruck, because I'm a geek on the level that you are, and on the stage, Twitter, Facebook, and the blog and all that, I project this working class poet guy, which is a big part of who I am. But the professor guy hasn't had a place to talk or anyone to talk to for like 5 years now. And everyone on the internet is always wishing that I was their professor, or they could have been in my class, or what would it be like? And I wanted to help you, and I wanted a way to alleviate that. And then you stopped by my apartment the other day. What was it, a few weeks ago?
Yeah.
To donate some books to the bookstore that we run. And before you knew it, you were interviewing me. And there were no,
as is my want.
It's not even, but what you were interviewing me, like you said,
who are you reading?
Who are you reading? But you said things like, well, before you turn on before you turn on the recording. Yeah. We sat down, and before you knew it, we were talking about would I have been able to successfully. Would I have been as successful if my best friend hadn't died 5 years ago? Yeah. Was that a catalyst? Would it be more difficult to take off the way I'm taking off if he were alive, because we had this really terrible competitive thing going on.
Right.
We loved each other.
This should be a lesson to you guys. Don't be friends with me, because I will start asking things like that as though it's an interview when we're just having a casual conversation.
But I enjoy it because
it gets you thinking.
Before you knew it, we had moved on from the death of my best friend to 9/11. Because we knew each other on 9/11. Right. We actually got together on, I think it was like 9/13 or 9/14 at Sang Lee's apartment to try to kind of smart guy salon and get our heads around what was going on, know. And man, I wish we had a recording in that room. That was some conversation.
In a lot of respects, I think many people don't want to know what they said back then. But,
I do.
Yeah.
I remember for me, after 9/11, I was working just some office job, and no one in the office would believe me that something terrible was happening, because it was in New York, and we were in New Jersey. That's got nothing to do with here. And I'm like, listen, the country.
Yeah.
Collective.
In the first couple hours, like nobody.
If
you weren't around
couple
TV
hours.
when you didn't know what.
I tell people all the time I got fired on 9/11 because I left. I said I'm going home, because I called my mom.
Yeah.
I called my girlfriend I was living with at the time and my grandmother, and they were all just hysterical. And you could hear CNN on in the background.
Right.
We're gonna die, So I said to my boss, I'm leaving. And she said, if you walk out that door, you're fired. So the joke I always tell is, I was fired on 9/11, but, she rehired me during the moment of silence on 9/12, because, and that was like the first time when I really realized that I was looking at the world through different goggles than most people. Mm-hmm. Because of not just because of the academic thing either, but because of the company that I had always kept. You, Delaney, Sang, and Sang and I had a situation going for a while where he was helping support his family, so I was going off and doing the grad school thing, and then on the weekends I was teaching him everything I was learning during the week.
Yeah.
Which, everyone's like, well, how did you become so good at teaching? I did it while I was learning, and I learned more because I was teaching. And, that's one of the reasons, another reason I wanted to do this is because it's a platform for teaching. So I just, I thought it was a good idea. And the big funny thing about it, the funny reason I wanted to do this is I figured it's the only way I'm going to get to see you on a regular basis.
Because I don't have friends anymore. I just have guests. That's or business pitches. But.
I was thinking about how long I've known you, and
yeah, say like 1999. I think we.
I mean, come on, man. We did the Atkins diet together.
Oh yeah.
How many people can say that?
And I've kept it off mysteriously. I still don't understand why. Because I went back, off of Atkins. I never put the weight back on. So, I consider it an achievement.
I had this crazy conversation with Sang once because he was a huge fan of the Atkins diet, and he's like, what do you think about all these people who are saying it's going to give me a heart attack? I think about that a lot, and I'm like, no, you were smoking 3 packs a day.
Yeah, and diabetic.
And eating nothing but takeout, and he was a perpetual bachelor, But I will say that if he were alive today, I'd probably be on television or something, because he had this... We had this, I would call him up and go, dude, I'm thinking about a poster that looks like this. And he would email it to me 10 minutes later. So he had this way of putting what I saw in my head into visual images. And then he never really understood. And I mean, this is for all graphic designers too. Graphic designers, filmmakers, musicians. He never understood how all that training in visual art had made him a very poetic writer. He always kind of I wish I had been writing, and I'm like, you kind of were.
Man. Yeah, you didn't get that the design was feeding into.
Yeah. So, I mean, now when I work privately with students, I try to tell them that, there's a lot of wax on, wax off things with writing. Most of them go, what the hell does that mean? Because I don't remember the Karate Kid, and then I got to show them a YouTube video, and then I feel old.
Which is what the internet does to us all.
I think the internet's keeping me young.
Yeah, I got no idea. All I know is I saw my wedding pictures from 10 years ago and realized I think I look younger, despite the gray hair.
You're Bob Hope, man.
You have
an age
going to my 80s and 90s,
You look the same as you did when I met you.
Yeah, I like to think I feel better about it. I dress better, certainly. But.
So what are your thoughts about this little NJ Poet Corner? I don't want it to be all about, hey, man, I'm doing readings.
Next time we'll ask what you actually teach. We'll talk about, what, and if you were teaching in a non-virtual setting, what you would do.
I am already teaching in
I know.
If I were teaching in a non-virtual setting?
Yeah.
We'll
save that for next time.
But I'll give you one answer that'll lead us into a very conversation for next time. The one class I'm dying to teach is a class that I've been thinking about for a long time called Batman Studies. So that should give you some sense where I'm at. It's been great talking to you, man. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, we'll connect next month.
All right, cool.
And that was NJ Poets Corner with Charles Bivona. Chuck's at charlesbivona.com, but you should just follow him on Twitter at Charles Bivona, and that's Bivona. He'll be back next month to talk about the class he'd love to teach, which apparently is Batman Studies, and we're going to find out. Maybe I'll use that great Prince Bat Dance song for the background music. Now, after our conversations, both of them, as is my wont, I asked Dan and Chuck, so who are you reading? In Dan's case, because he's been so overwhelmed by this whole project, that kind of morphed into, so who do you plan to read now that you got some time? If you want to hear their answers to that, you'll need to become a supporter of the podcast so you can get access to our new monthly show, Fear of a Square Planet. And you can do that at patreon.com/VMSpod or at paypal.me/VMSpod. I've got all sorts of goals and goodies. Nothing as good as a big party at the Mark Twain house, but I'm also not going to get $300,000 of supporters out there. Still, there's that monthly podcast. There's a patron-only blog. I'm looking to launch a series of ebooks, and there are other neat stretch goals that I have. So go to patreon.com/VMSpod and support the Art of Fine Conversation. And if you don't like Patreon, just go to paypal.me/VMSpod and make a donation that way. If you do, you'll get access to the same material through a side site that I've launched, fearofasquareplanet.com. Special thanks go out to Paul W. Jones, Fred Kish, Jonathan Kranz, Andrew Mason, and Zach Martin for going over and above in their support of the Virtual Memories show. There's a full list of show supporters at chimeraobscura.com/VM. This episode was recorded at the Mark Twain House. At least the main part, NJ Poets Corner, was done at home. Getting to Mark Twain House, I think, was just like a $5 toll at the Tappan Zee. We had food waiting for us there. Dan's wife, Beverly, was kind enough to pick up a coffee for me and not ask for $2. And so no other expenses besides, gas and time. Our music for this episode is Nothing's Gonna Bring Me Down by David Bayerwald, used with permission from the artist. David's got a reunion project going with his great 80s band David and David, and you can find out more and support that at facebook.com/davidanddavidmusic. And that's it for this week's Virtual Memories show. Thank you so much for listening. I have not recorded next week's episode, so I'm not sure what you can expect next time around. I do have a session booked with the cartoonist Phoebe Gleckner, who's best known for the hybrid novel, The Diary of a Teenage Girl. And that's supposed to take place during the MoCA Cartooning Festival in New York City next weekend. But I tend not to trust anyone I haven't actually sat down and recorded with. We do have a time and a place set up. That will probably be the next episode, but who knows? Maybe something comes up. Maybe I find some other cartoonists at MoCA. You have to come back and find out. And until next time, you can subscribe to the Virtual Memories show and download past episodes at the iTunes store. You can also find all our episodes and get on our email list at either of our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/VM. You can also follow the Virtual Memories show on Twitter at VMSPod, on Facebook at facebook.com/virtualmemoriesshow, and at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com. And if you like this show, please go to iTunes, look up the Virtual Memories show, and leave a rating and review for this podcast. That'll help us build a bigger audience. Until next time, you've been listening to the Virtual Memories show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and you are awesome. Keep it that way.